Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Welcome, friends, to the second day of our two-part series on the Sīla division of the Noble Eightfold Path. Yesterday we went over what Sīla meant as a habit, code of moral conduct, what we do to act skillfully in the world, in a way that benefits ourselves and others. We spoke about how Sīla leads to the various stages as happiness and tranquility, etc., that lead to concentration and then to wisdom. Then we went over sammavaca, which is right speech. We're going to jump right in and we're going to talk about right action, right livelihood, and then end up with talking about the 5 precepts. So, sammakammanto is right action. And the definition that the Buddha gives is that one abstains from taking life. One abstains from taking what is not given, and one abstains from sexual misconduct. These 3 things are considered to be right action. And so, what is taking, or what is abstaining from taking life? The Pali word is panatipata. If you've taken the 5 precepts before, you know that's the first one. You've heard that word many times. Pana simply means like life, a being. And atipata is to slay. So basically what this right action is to abstain from slaying beings. Of course, this encapsulates all beings that are sentient beings that are in samsara, even the little creepy crawly ones that you hope stay on their side of the kuti, so you don't have to hurt them if they get too close. These kind of things. Even all these beings, the beings that slither on the ground, creepy crawlies, every being, when we take on this right action, we train to abstain from killing any being, even if it's for what we think is a good reason. Like that spider creeped me out. Right? So the Buddha's definition of this, what he says is there's a case where a certain person abstaining from taking of life dwells with rod laid down, merciful, beneficent, scrupulous, and with compassion for the welfare of all beings. So as I said in speaking about right speech yesterday, all of this is an ideal to strive for. You know, nobody expects that we're going to take the noble, we're going to take the 5 precepts, we're going to follow this, I'm going to totally refrain from killing all beings. And then, the next day you see a spider and you freak out and you're in a mind of fear and then you kill the spider or something like that. And it's like, oh man, I'm a really horrible Buddhist. I'm so bad, I suck, all these kind of things. No, we want to understand that this is, when you get into a situation like that, that's the situation, that's the time to examine that. What were the events that led to you taking the life of that being? What was the mind state involved in that? And then you can start to see how one thing leads to another. You can start to see how fear makes you unmindfully do action. And then you can even extrapolate that when you start to see that how it works in your own mind. You can start to see how it kind of works in the world. All the fighting and the killing and the fear and the hatred and all that. You can start to understand a little bit of why this group hates that group and they've been fighting for a long time and all these kind of things. Right? It gives you insight into how things work in nature. And so with that insight, when you continue to practice and you develop the insight and you're in your room or whatever, and then there's all of a sudden a big spider. And you feel the fear behind you. You feel that fear. The fear is there, but it doesn't control you anymore because you understand, that the beings want to live, and you understand what it is to take the life of a being. And even though you decide, okay, well, maybe I'm just going to try to grab one of those cups and bring it outside or something like that. That's when you have developed the insight and the compassion to overcome your innate drives to do something as ideal as letting go of the slaying of beings, of abstaining from slaying beings. It's not easy. It's a practice. It's an ideal to strive for. So it's important in that regard to do your best. Most people in the world, most beings, most human beings are not going around killing other human beings. That's, life. They're not other people, but maybe they're killing all kinds of little beings. So especially for us, in a country where we're not in war-torn, we might have bullets flying and people shooting each other and all these kind of things. A little bit easier that we can concentrate on, developing this ideal, this practice of avoiding taking the life of even the smallest beings among us. So the next one is Adinna Dana Vedamani, and that is abandoning the taking what is not given. So essentially this is stealing. And the Buddha's definition of this is one does not take what has not been given in a town or a village or even in the wilderness if it's something that belongs to somebody else. So this is something that we can see that it might not be as harmful and as big as, killing a being, but we can understand we like our things. Right? We like, I have this and I have that, and this is a useful tool, and I have a car and I have these things. And then I'm sure all of us have had some experience of somebody taking something that we hold dear or something that we find useful, right? And it's a horrible experience. It's like you have an attachment to this thing, and then the next day, the next second, it's gone. And you understand that this is not very conducive to living in the world with other beings and living amongst other, in a compassionate and understanding community. So with this understanding in mind, you decide, well, if I know that I don't want things to be stolen from me, I will not do that to other people. I won't take what has not been given to me. And of course in modern times, that can be quite complicated. And especially if you're living, trying to follow the precepts and all these kind of things, and you think, well, if I take a pen from work, is that stealing? Or even people think, well, if I download a movie or something like that, is that stealing? You know, there's a lot of gray area. And if you follow the precepts in your life and you really try to take that on, you'll actually realize that there's a lot of gray area in life, period. There's a lot of times where it's not going to be a black and white decision. Like, easy as day. Well, duh, of course, I don't do this. So the best we can do is the best we can do. Just like when Buddha was talking to his son Rahula from yesterday. You know, you do something and then you examine, has this been harmful? And, oh yeah, it has, so I try to do better next time. So he says that this person, the Buddha says that this person does not take in the manner of a thief. So we want to avoid taking what is not ours. And so the next one is kamesu miccācara. Simply means, you can define that as sensual misconduct or sexual misconduct. It's most often talked about as sexual misconduct because that is indeed what the Buddha's definition of this right action is, much more related to the sexual activity. So it says that the Buddha's definition is that he abstains from sexual activity with one who is under the protection of their mother, father, brothers, siblings, aunts, uncles, etc. So we can understand that to be like minors, or even maybe people who have maybe they're of age but they don't have the mental capacity to really make these kind of decisions, that kind of stuff. So people who are under the protection of their family, people who are under the protection of their Dhamma. Basically that would mean monks and nuns and priests and all these kind of things. And people who are married, obviously. People who are even engaged. So you can see, and another one is people who entail punishments. I don't know what that means. I haven't been able to find any information. We don't know 2,600 years ago what that could mean. But these are the aspects of sexual misconduct. We can see that this is conduct that is non-consensual and that is harmful to yourself or others. And if you think about it, today we live in this kind of global big society where everybody kind of doesn't even know each other. We have like 10,000 friends on Facebook, but we don't know each other and all these kind of things. Think about 2,600 years ago in small villages in India, or even anywhere, small communities, something like adultery, something like, these kind of acts that break trust and cause this strife. That's not only hurting the people who are directly involved in it, but it's hurting the community itself, causing strife in the community. So I think it makes sense as to why the Buddha would, say that we should be very careful in this regard. And so these three things together combine as right action. And again, in short, you can see that it's simply examining your actions and doing your best to perform actions that will not be harmful to yourself and others. You don't even have to think, well, what's the Pali word for this? And what's the direct definition for this and all that? You can just think, and what I'm doing harmful or beneficial? Should I continue to do this? That's something that you can have a mindfulness for as you're going through your day. Have that power of recollection. That when you're in a situation, when you're, getting involved in something, and you can have, if you think about these three acts, right? What are the killing, the stealing, and the sexual misconduct? When somebody is doing these things, they could be wrapped up in fear, wrapped up in anger, wrapped up in greed and lust. All these mind states that cloud the mind, that we, get involved in, and we just, we can do something, and then, later on we're more clear-headed and we're like, wow, I didn't even, realize that, I was doing this, or that it would get to this point, these kind of things. It's because at that point, when you have this clouded mind full of this greed and hatred and fear, you don't have mindfulness. You don't have heedfulness. And so you don't know what is best for you and what is best for others. So if we develop this mindfulness of this is that we want to perform, we want to keep right action in mind, so that all the actions that we do will be beneficial. It will help you and the people around you, not harm you and the people around you. And then next is samma ajivo, which is right livelihood. The Buddha's definition for right livelihood is quite short and to the point. It says, one abandons wrong livelihood and takes on right livelihood. That's it, nice and simple. And actually, I've thought about this for a while, and it's interesting. I think it was left vague for a purpose, and I'll talk about that in a little bit when we look in a little bit into the definition of ajivo. But in the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fives, number 177, so it would be 5.177, the Buddha gives 5 types of livelihood that he says that somebody who is a practitioner of the Dhamma should avoid. The first one is business in weapons. So this is, somebody who is creating and selling weapons. The second is business in human beings. So this is somebody who is going out and, taking people and making them slaves and selling slaves, these kind of things. The third is business in meat. So having animals, killing them, butchering them, and then selling their meat. The fourth is business in intoxicants. So making alcohol and drugs and these kind of things and then selling them. And the fifth is making and selling poison. So these 5 things are pretty much, as far as I can tell, the only direct careers that the Buddha says somebody who practices the Dhamma should avoid. And so again, in modern times, it can be confusing. So somebody, things that I've come across in the past, somebody's like, I work for this corporation. The part of the corporation I work for does like this, does something good for humanity. But the corporation also makes like weapons and things like that. Is that wrong livelihood? Right? Things can get really complicated in that regard. And people can discuss that, and different teachers will say different things. But I think in my own practice and what I understand of the Dhamma, it always comes down to examining your intention and doing what you really feel is best for you. Some people, they're part of that corporation, they may feel, well, I'm not directly contributing to, people dying and all these kind of things. And other people might feel, well, maybe I am, and they feel like they have to leave. It's up to each individual person, to make that decision, to look inside themselves and, decide. The same thing like when I was talking about, stealing, about like downloading movies or downloading things that are copyright stuff. I know at least 2 monks who have made arguments that that's not going against stealing. I personally disagree. And it's only because when I had Netflix and I would, copy the movies and all that kind of stuff. I did all that kind of stuff. Downloaded video games, all these things. But it came to a point where in my own practice, my practice was developing, and I had a career, and I had enough money to buy the things, and then I became a photographer, and I kind of started to understand what it's like to have your own things that you create that can be used by other people. And then I decided, I'm not going to do this anymore. And it's not that somebody told me you shouldn't do it. I looked into my own mind and examined my own intentions, and I decided I don't think I want to do this anymore. So this is important when it comes to the precepts. You can try to ask a monk all the time. There's this one gentleman who emails a variety of different monastics regularly with questions and concerns about every little minute possible thing that he can think of when it comes to living these precepts, living by right action, right livelihood. And that's not going to tell you, nobody can give you the answer. You have to examine that in your own experience, in your own practice, and make those decisions on your own. Because in the end, it's your karma. It's not somebody else's karma. If you like, some of you might know Angulimala, the Buddhist serial killer who became an arahant, right? The story goes that his teacher became jealous of him because he was a good student and all these things, and people liked him. So he said, the teacher told him to go and kill 1,000 people and take their fingers. Angulimala means a string of fingers. So he would kill people, take their finger, add it to his big necklace, his mala, right? Because his teacher told him, right? And then it took the Buddha coming to him and snapping him out of that for him to realize, oh man, I was really stupid and I did so much harm, and now I'm going to change that, right? So we all aren't lucky enough to have the Buddha walking around making sure, snapping us out and making that decision. So it's good to talk to somebody who is a Kalyanamitta, like somebody like a good friend, like Bhante Ji and things like that. But in the end, you have to make the decisions on your own. The Buddha doesn't say, he gives you 5 examples of wrong livelihood. And he says, do right livelihood instead of wrong livelihood. So that can be like, well, what does that mean? You'll know the answers if you look inside yourself. The practice and the understanding, looking inside yourself, looking at your intentions, understanding these things through wisdom allows you don't need to question as much. You can sell it. Even maybe later you realize you're wrong, but at least at that point you said, this is, I think, the best thing for me to do. So I guess that's my little aside there, but coming back to right livelihood, the Buddha also in a sutta, he talks about how to manage your income and your expenses. And he says, he's talking to a householder who asked him about this, and he says, one should live so that their expenses do not exceed their income. And he's even given, this is Buddha the financial planner, telling people, don't live above your means. Don't get into all kinds of debt, and don't spend, get 5 credit cards and all these kind of things. Live within your means. And of course, all throughout the sutras, the Buddha gives many such advice to lay people on, how to living, honoring and taking care of your family and your spouse and mother, father, community, all these kind of things. So this leads me to how I wanted to extrapolate from the word ajivo. Jiva simply means life. And one of the ways that you can translate ajiva, other than livelihood, is living or mode of living. So the reason why I feel like the Buddha was pretty clear and not so detailed in his definition was because he wasn't just talking about what you do to make money to survive. He was talking about how you live, what you do in your life, what you take on in your life. And so what I've come to understand and what I've come to see in my own experience and my own understanding is that following the Noble Eightfold Path, taking that upon and practicing that, making that part of your life so that it is not just what you do, say like with meditation, like, okay, 4 o'clock I do this, 5 o'clock I do this, 6 o'clock I practice meditation, and then I'm done for the day, right? The whole of the Noble Eightfold Path is something that you take on as not what you do, but part of who you are. And not only what you do in terms of your work and your family and your not habits, whatever things that you do, like play the piano and all these kind of things. All these things that you define as this is what I do. Somebody who is living right livelihood and has taken upon the Noble Eightfold Path, the Noble Eightfold Path is what they do. It infuses every interaction because they have that mindfulness. Whatever they're doing, am I living by right action? Am I living by right speech? Whatever the situation that's coming up in their life. So for me, right livelihood is not what am I doing that I get a paycheck every 2 weeks. It's what am I doing? How am I living so that I am encompassing, I am becoming the, I guess what would you call, the avatar of the Buddhist teaching, the avatar of the Noble Eightfold Path. And so that understanding is actually kind of how what I see is how, the reason it led me to becoming a monastic. Because when I started to live the Noble Eightfold Path as a layperson, and I did it for years, so it's not just, I became a monastic, now I'm living the Noble Eightfold Path. I integrated the Noble Eightfold Path into my life, and it became part of who I was. So much so to the fact that it's all I want to do. So when you do that, when it's not something that you just tick off on a habit trainer or something that you put on your schedule, when it becomes part of your life, it becomes a lot easier to live by these principles. It becomes a lot easier to live by this Noble Eightfold Path. It really is so simple and amazing to me. It's like, I was raised Catholic, and I love some of the stuff that Jesus says, like, turn the other cheek, and, why are you looking at the mote in somebody else's eye when you have a log in your own eye? The Buddha basically says the same thing. These kind of things, right? Almost all religions, all the religions that I've studied and looked at throughout my life, they all say a lot of the same things. But only one gives you how to do these things, and that's Buddhism. Only one, the Buddha, says, if you want to do this, this is how you do it. I've laid it all out for you. Follow this Noble Eightfold Path. And as a matter of fact, the Buddha himself, he doesn't say that he created the Noble Eightfold Path. One of the coolest similes in the suttas is the Buddha talking about how he found the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path, the Dhamma, is always there. It's always in existence. It doesn't die out. What dies out is people's knowledge of it, that people knowing and understanding it and following it and practicing it in their life. So the Buddha describes the Noble Eightfold Path as, the simile goes that there's a person and he's going down a path, and he comes to a fork and he sees a path that's really all overgrown, and he follows that path. And when he gets to the end of that path, he sees this ancient city that's fallen into disrepair, and it's this beautiful city and all these avenues and colonnades and all this, it describes this wonderful, how this city used to be this amazing grand place. And then he says, and then this person would go back to the king and would say, I found this path in this city. Go back to this city and make it anew. Bring it back to life. And so the Buddha says, just in that way, I found this path, this Noble Eightfold Path. And I followed it. And I found this city. And now I come back to you with this Noble Eightfold Path. And so, when you, in my humble opinion, when you are living the Noble Eightfold Path, whether you're a carpenter or a doctor or whatever, a plumber, that's what you do as part of your livelihood. And it can be a very meaningful part of your life. You can do, sometimes your jobs really does something to help people. But what can be utterly meaningful is living by this Noble Eightfold Path that transforms you, that begins the long process of clearing out your mind, clearing out the gunk in your mind. As I said yesterday in the beginning, the cleansing of one's own mind, and the gratitude and the happiness that arises as you begin to do that. And you have so much gratitude for the Buddha, and gratitude that there's this Noble Eightfold Path. You search your whole life and you're trying to find truth and seeking things. That's what I find that many Westerners that I've met who came from all different kinds of religions and things like that, they're truth seekers. They're spiritual seekers. Because what they were raised, they didn't find truth in it. They tried all kinds of different religions. My major in college was anthropology. I loved history, as I said. I've grown up, I love humanity and culture and religion, so I learned about all types of religions. But for me, the truth was in this Noble Eightfold Path. When I found this Noble Eightfold Path, I said, yes, this is something that fits with my life. And this is something I want to try to take on. And the power of following this path, I can't say enough of. So that's, I guess, a good segue into the beginning. The Buddha says the beginning of following the path. And that is Sīla, starting to practice Sīla. So I'll talk about the 5 precepts now. And I want to read this directly because I think it's impactful, more impactful than if I just summarize it. It says, the Buddha says, there are these 5 gifts, 5 great gifts: original, long-standing, traditional, ancient, unadulterated. Notice that. He's saying that these things, these 5 precepts, are not something that Buddhism made up. They're not something that he created. They're something that had already existed, most likely in the culture at the time, these kind of things. So this is something that Buddha is saying is ancient. It's unadulterated. Unadulterated from the beginning. That are not open to suspicion, will never be open to suspicion, and are unfaulted by knowledgeable contemplatives and Brahmins. Which 5? Panatipata Vedamani Sikapadang Samadhyami. I undertake the training rule to abstain from slaying beings. Sikapadang Samadhyami means a training rule to be undertaken. You can see right from the get-go, this is not a commandment. This is not thou shalt not. This is you are taking upon, of your own volition, of your own choice, the training rule to train in following this precept. Doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect in it and that you're never going to break it. It's a training rule that you're taking upon. Adinna dana vedamani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training rule to abstain from taking what is not given. Kamesu michachara vedamani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training rule to abstain from sexual misconduct. Musavada. Sounds familiar. We did that yesterday. Musavada vedamani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the training rule to abstain from lying. And the last one, everybody's favorite. Sura Merya Majja Pamadatana Vedamani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I undertake the training rule to abstain from, actually there's two types of alcohol mentioned in that, Sura and Merya, drinks and drugs that cause heedlessness. So that's the 5 precepts. These are the basic Sīla that somebody who becomes a Buddhist follows. When you officially, quote unquote, become a Buddhist, you take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha, and then you choose to take on and follow these 5 precepts. And so some of them are pretty simple. Most people are not stealing and killing and all these kind of things. Others, like alcohol, are a little tougher for some people, you know, and people have questions like, what if I only drink a glass of wine at dinner and all these kind of things? Right? Again, it's lots of gray areas. People ask all kinds of questions in these regards. So that's up to you to make that decision. So the Buddha goes on and he talks about these 5 precepts. You give, they're faultless gifts. What are they gifts of? They're gifts of fearlessness. Somebody who follows these 5 precepts, the Buddha says, gives countless beings freedom from what? Freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression. And not only do you give countless beings this freedom, but you also partake in that freedom. And one of the benefits of metta is that you become dear to human beings and non-human beings. If you think about just interactions with people, you have somebody in your life who follows the 5 precepts, who you trust, who you know they're not going to steal from you, they're not going to lie to you, they're not going to sleep with your spouse, they're not going to try to kill you or your dog or whatever, right? In a world where you have all kinds of greed, hatred, and delusion, and all kinds of, you can't trust anybody, you can trust that person. You know, they have your back. They're not going to stab you in the back. They're not going to throw verbal daggers at you behind your back and all these kind of things. That's that gift of fearlessness. You can fear about all these other people, but I don't have to fear that person. That person's a good person. I can trust them. Right? And if you think about it, that's a wonderful thing to have, that you can even just have one person in your life that you can fully trust. That's a heck of a gift, in my opinion. And so they don't have anything to fear. They don't have to worry about these things, danger, animosity, etc. So again, when you are everything in the Noble Eightfold Path, absolutely everything in the Noble Eightfold Path, when you're following that, you're not only benefiting yourself, you're benefiting everybody else around you. And the Buddha tells us this. This is in the Sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, the 4th book, number 99. He talks about 4 types of individuals living in the world. There's a person who practices the Dhamma, practices the precepts, the Noble Eightfold Path, for their benefit, but not for the benefit of others. There's a person who practices for the benefit of others, but not for the benefit of themselves. There's the person who practices, probably not the Noble Eightfold Path, neither for themselves or others, And that is the person who practices both for themselves and for others. And it's pretty obvious who the Buddha exalts as the person who's doing it the right way. The person who practices for themselves and for others. There's a wonderful sutta called the Acrobat. And in this sutta, there's this master acrobat and there's his apprentice. I always forget her name. It's a really long Pali name that I haven't gotten yet. But anyway, so the master goes, we will get up on, so apparently they get up on stilts and they do all kinds of acrobatics like on stilts, like 10 feet in the air, these kind of things, these acrobats. And he says, we will get up on the stilts and we will perform our trade, and then we will, you will look after me and I'll look after you, and we'll come down safe and we can enjoy what we earn. But the assistant, she was much smarter than her master, because she says, no, I'll watch after myself, you watch after yourself, and then together we'll be safe, we'll come down and we'll do what we earn. And the Buddha says, just as the assistant says, one who watches after themselves watches after others. One who watches after others watches after themselves. And then the Buddha says, well, how do you watch after yourselves and others? Well, his answer is actually the 4 foundations of mindfulness, what you're going to learn from Bhante Sīla, is following the Satipatthana. And in brief, it's living mindfully. When you are living mindfully of your own actions, when you are mindfully following this Noble Eightfold Path and living it, well then you're protecting yourself and you're protecting the other people around you. And the same when you follow these 5 precepts. So, in the end, actually, I'll go a little bit more into 5 precepts is the most basic, the most common thing that a person who is following the Noble Eightfold Path practices. But there's also 8 precepts. And these are what we usually call 8 monastic precepts. You took these precepts when you came here to stay at the monastery for the week. In lay life, it's tradition that during apositas, these are like full moon days, new moon days, it's tradition that laity will take on these 8 precepts and try to do practice more diligently and longer and these kind of things. So it's like once every 2 weeks for a day, you're trying to really double down on your practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. So that's following those 8 precepts. And if you've heard, like Bhante Sīla, right, when he quote unquote gave you the precepts when you came here, it's come down in the tradition that the monastic, and even if you can read it, it says, I ask you, Bhante, to give me the precepts. But in all reality, nobody can give you the precepts. A monk can't bless upon you, I bless upon you the 5 precepts, may you, follow the 5 precepts. No. There's something that you have to take on of your own choice in your life. Nobody can give them to you. I can give you the 5 precepts. The next day, you're like, oh, I broke this precept. Now I have to go rush back to the priest so they can, give me the precept again or something like that. No. So when you're in your own life and you screw up, you do 3 things. And the way it works in Buddhism, and especially usually in regard to the monks, but not only the monks, somebody will do a transgression. Somebody will do something stupid, and they'll go to the Buddha and they'll say, I've transgressed. And the Buddha's like, foolish man, yes, you have transgressed. The Buddha's like, you're foolish. It's kind of funny when you read it. But he's like, but, he says, you admit that you've transgressed, and you have made amends in accord with the Dhamma. Making amends in accord with the Dhamma is apologizing, confessing. So the first thing you're doing is that you're acknowledging that you did something wrong, that you broke a precept. The second thing that you're doing is making amends for breaking that precept. And, you can, the only confession in Buddhism is between monks. So you don't have to like come and confess to a monk or anything like that, what you did. But if what you did harmed somebody else, do your best to make amends. Apologize to that person. Try to do whatever you can to compensate to that person. And that's making amends in accord with the Dhamma. And then the third thing is strive for future restraint, i.e., try to be better, more wise next time, not do it again. So these three things. Actually, Ajahn Brahm kind of took from that, and he does this thing. It's called AFL, acknowledge, forgive, and learn. I think that works just as, it's the same thing, really. It works even easier because you can remember that snazzy three-letter thing. You're acknowledging that you did something. You're forgiving yourself. You're, apologizing. You're seeking forgiveness. And you're learning from that so you do better next time. And so that's what happens. If you break a precept, don't try to fool yourself that you didn't break the precept. Acknowledge that you did it. Forgive yourself. Realize that you're just a being in samsara trying to do the best that you can. And make a vow, make a determination that from here on in I follow this precept again, and I'm going to do better next time. So every time you do that, you just go through that little cycle, that little thing of acknowledge, forgive, and learn, and move forward. Don't get all, sometimes people really get mired in their own pity and their own, judgment. They're like, oh, I'm so horrible. I'm a really bad Buddhist and all these kind of things. Why did I do that? And people are hitting their head and doing all kinds of silly things, really coming down on themselves. The right way to do it is acknowledge, forgive, learn. To really understand that you are a being in samsara just like all the other beings. Do the practice. Don't get too mired in your failures. But also don't hide from them too. Accept them. Move forward. And so this comes to the end of my 2 days talking to you guys about Sīla. Talking to you guys about living by virtuous principles. Remember the difference between a rule and a principle. A rule is something that somebody imposes upon you. A principle is something that you take up on yourself. And if you keep that understanding inside, then you can be joyous and joyful that you are trying to live in a restrained and beneficial way, as opposed to feeling like some other outside power is making you do something. Why do I gotta do this, blah, blah, blah. So I wish you much success and benefit in the rest of this retreat, and going home, hopefully taking the Noble Eightfold Path with you, and doing your best to follow and make the Noble Eightfold Path not only something that you do, but also part of your livelihood. So, thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.